evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and welcome to Beer Blather 202. Unprecedented rot. We're doing this, of course, on our Odyssey channel and simultaneously on 3 timelines in Twitter. Mine, his, and Quadverum's, and in YouTube for at least a little while. And of course, as usual, but just for those of you who are elsewhere, we only monitor the chat in Odyssey. So if you want to participate in the chat, don't be such a lazy bum. Click on the link and come to our Odyssey channel, and then you can participate in the chat to your heart's content. We might even answer you. Who knows? Please, if you haven't done so and you are in Odyssey, click on subscribe and follow us so that you get notices when we go on the air. How should I put this mildly? Don't be a stingy son of a bitch and buy us a cup of coffee. You can do that by clicking on support or on the $sign in the chat and contribute a tip to the chat. Or, God forbid, click on join and buy us a couple of cups of lattes per month. And that way you can participate in our members-only programming and go to sleep with a warm and fuzzy feeling that you have contributed to the permanence of this channel. You can also go, and I encourage you to do it, to quadverum.com/support us, where you can make a one-time contribution or become a subscriber and help maintain both this channel and quadverum.com, which happens to be one of the nicest social media websites in the world. Certainly better than Telegram, way better than anything you do with Zuckerman. And no, we do not pay for vans with illegal absentee ballots like Zuckerman does. So, keep the elections clean and support us instead of those assholes. Now that I have done that, welcome again. This is Saul Montes-Bradley, the largest human repository of useless information. One of these days, I'm going to do a Democratic congresswoman and say the largest human suppository. Remember when she went out and said that Trump had an erection instead of election?
No.
Oh, I'll get you the video, my friend. You're going to love it. And this over here, over there, is Thomas Wictor, the largest... wrong person. The only living expert in World War I flamethrowers and so many more things from San Frascornia. Was it San Frascornia in Califisco? No, I'm sorry. He's from Mexifornia, way down south. And having said all that, how are you, Thomas?
Oh, I'm good. I found a new YouTube channel, new to me, and it was this very pleasant young Canadian woman living in the UK and doing a lot of taste testing. So she taste tested beers, she taste tested candy bars, and then she decided to spend the day drinking like Churchill. And it was really funny. And recently, all her videos are about how America can change for the better. And it was like, okay, you're done. I understand it was asking too much of a Canadian to not criticize my country. But I watched you initially because you were interesting and unique, and now you've joined the thundering herd that stretches off, the wildebeest that stretch off in every direction to the horizon. So I don't waste my time on wildebeests. So adios, lady. It was nice. It was a good 2 weeks. So it's a real shame because I can't think of a less interesting topic. I mean, to go from today I'm going to drink like Churchill, and of course she wasn't able to make it. I've seen two different channels make the Churchill drinking attempt, and they can't do it. And now she's just another typical Canadian bitching about America, even though she's from Canada and she's living in the UK. What do you have to do with the United States on any level?
Nothing, but they hate the US because it's popular to hate the US, you see. You cannot be a bien pensant asshole unless you hate the US and make the point clear. So whatever else you do, you have to make fun. By the way, have you noticed how all of these idiots at the same time accuse the US of being this behemoth that tramples upon everyone and being a bunch of palookas from the hills?
Yeah. No, I mean, okay, everybody, they love to talk about, the John Wayne version of diplomacy or whatever. And they have no idea what they're talking about. Like John Wayne, what made him so long-lived was that he was one of the first male actors to show emotion. And
yes,
he was entirely his own thing. And the reason these people always devolve to the John Wayne analogy is because they heard somebody else say it. They don't actually know anything about John Wayne, and
they haven't seen a single one of his movies. I guarantee you.
And Wayne had an incredibly diverse filmography. I mean, the movie The Cowboys has literally nothing to do with Rio Bravo, other than he's playing a cowboy in both movies. But or True Grit.
Oh yes.
True Grit. I saw the remake, the Coen brothers remake, and it was bad. I mean, it was people acting, and the original one, it was people acting, but nobody's read the novel True Grit. I have, and it's a very stylized novel. And the movie True Grit, people accuse Wayne of being over the top and Glenn Campbell of being wooden, but everybody played their parts perfectly. And it's a movie that once you see, you never forget. And I couldn't tell you exactly what happened in the Coen brothers remake. So I don't know. I just
you had me at Coen brothers remake, and I already expect nothing but shit.
Well, I mean, these are guys who started out in one direction, went in another direction, and I mean, I don't know. It's just I don't rewatch Coen brothers movies except for Fargo, and that's entirely because of the acting in it, and not in the writing at all. I mean, you can't beat Steve Buscemi. Steve Buscemi is one of those dramatic and comedic actors that, again, he's his own thing. And I just what really turns me off now is generic people. And one of the reasons we're in the pickle we're in politically is because everybody in that the Biden administration is generic. Biden himself is generic. All their policies are generic. It's like everything is rote. Everything is by the numbers. And
speaking of this son of a bitch in particular,
exactly.
Somebody in I mean, we already have tons of requests to talk about Yemen, as if we weren't going to. And they say how Biden would rather take a bribe than take action. Well, sometimes, because when it is against the interest of the U.S., he's the first one in line to take action, like he did right off the bat in February of 21. When nobody was looking, Blinken took Yemen Houthis out of the terrorist organization list, thereby freeing the Houthis to finance themselves throughout the world, use the banking system, import all they needed for their war machine legally. And while Biden was trying to fillet a mullah or two, because, Iran needs to be brought into the realm of the nations. And this is how this moron celebrated the accomplishment, an accomplishment, I tell you, a success of our diplomacy. There we go.
We're also stepping up our diplomacy to end the war in Yemen, a war which has created a humanitarian and strategic catastrophe. This war has to end. And to underscore our commitment, we are ending all American support for offensive operations in the war in Yemen, including relevant arms sales.
Okay. The little fuck. Pardonnez-moi mon français. Stop arms sales to Saudi Arabia.
Yep.
Withdrew support for Saudi Arabia in the war with Yemen, which was the only thing that was keeping the Houthis at bay. Allowed the Houthis to rearm, reorganize, and with Iran's aid become a force, which in turn kept a couple of million people surrounded in Sana'a, where they have been suffering all kinds of indignities since. And what did the chump? Did all of that so that now we have to send a fleet to the Red Sea to keep these barbarian camel fuckers at bay.
And okay, all the Houthi missile launching systems are portable. And when we gave them notice that we were going to attack, they just moved their missiles out and they're firing missiles at ships again. Shipping through the Red Sea is gone up. The price of that has gone up 300%. And all the goods that used to go through the Red Sea have doubled in price. Oil is going up.
Yep.
So, great job, Mr. President. Diplomacy is back.
Peachy. Of course, 95% of the ships that would have gone through the Suez Canal, and how many times, Thomas? 4 years ago, we were warning people that Bab el-Mandeb and Hormuz were the critical choke points that the U.S. needed to guarantee safe passage through. 70% of the trade from Southeast Asia to Europe, whether it's energy or supplies or parts or clothing even, go through the Suez Canal. And now 95% of the shipping through the Suez Canal is being diverted through the Cape of Good Hope. It takes an extra 2 weeks, 10 days to 2 weeks to reach Rotterdam. It, like you just said, it sent the freight prices through the roof. And that means that everything from parts for automobiles to clothing to energy is going up 20 to 50% in Europe. Now, after that happens to Europe, we're going to see the repercussions here. Because everything we buy from Europe is now going to be delayed. Welcome to supply line fuck up number 2.
Yeah.
And more expensive. And that is going to affect inflation here, yet again, so that some fucking imbecile at the Fed decides that we need to restrain the money supply, as if cutting off Bab el-Mandeb had nothing to do with it. They're going to drive us into a recession within the year.
Yeah, and I mean, okay, Will Rogers said that diplomacy is the art of saying good doggy while you look for a rock. So Trump diplomacy
still gets me. I'm sorry. You told it to me before we went on the air, and it still gets me. It's beautiful.
Yeah. And when Trump engaged in diplomacy, his people were holding the rock like this. That's how you do diplomacy. You don't unilaterally surrender and then say, now let's talk, because if there's
nothing to talk.
There's nothing to talk. They just go, yes, we'll get right on that, and then they rearm. And this is, I mean, Democrats have never understood this, especially the modern Democrats. Nixon was criticized for bombing the North Vietnamese back to the table. But this is how you do things. The Russians left Syria because Trump ordered the complete destruction of one of their units, 100% casualties. And this is the only thing. I mean, the Houthis have announced that they're going to start carrying out terrorism in this country.
Yes.
So,
come on, and Hezbollah and Hamas, they have to take a number at the border in the Rio Grande Valley sector, because there's going to be a how should I say this, a bottleneck of terrorists coming in now.
Okay,
we already have hundreds upon hundreds.
The Iranians are getting into the seizing the ship and firing missiles at ships act.
Yep.
So now that Hamas is basically going to be wiped out, Iran has nothing to lose by carrying out, ordering terrorism in this country. And this is the sort of thing, I mean, we're not prepared in any way, shape, or form, because our domestic intelligence is obsessed with conservatives.
So, January 6 tourists.
Exactly. So, and Catholics and parents who speak up at PTA meetings against the sexualizing of their elementary schoolers, all that. These are all extremists, and they have to be watched. So,
and don't you dare say anything about the U.S. Army, more concerned with travel expenses for women who want to have an abortion and sex change operations than with, oh my God, actual fucking military training.
Well, I mean, okay, when people think of the Army, people think of the military, they think of the Army. So that's what Lloyd Austin has been concentrating on. And, they're now allowing drag queens to wear full makeup while in uniform. And, I mean,
I almost forgot.
Yeah.
But wait a second. I need to cover my face with this thing.
Exactly.
I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed of these fuckers.
Well, see, this is the thing.
You know what? disguise is strike, kill. Pretty soon it's gonna be. Do you have some extra rouge?
Well, okay. I mean, I've probably mentioned this before, but one of Orson Welles's, he was an actor and an assistant, and his name was Francis Carpenter. And Francis Carpenter was the gayest man who ever lived. And when Pearl Harbor happened, Francis Carpenter was 41 years old, and he got an age waiver, and he joined the U.S. Navy, and he became an assault boat driver. And when we were doing the Sicily landing, he told the army on board that he knew Sicily like he knew the back of his hand, and that their maps were all wrong. And that so he volunteered to be a pathfinder for the army, and he was given permission. He turned down the offer of a pistol, and he was able to map out safe paths through the minefields by using his intuition as a set designer. He figured out where the mines were going to be, and he was right. And he single-handedly captured two armed Italian soldiers. They pointed their guns at him, and he said, "Now don't be silly." And he walked up to them. He spoke Italian. He took their guns, and they said, "Okay." And he was awarded the Silver Star for courage under fire. And then he went to the Pacific, and he became a helmsman. And the bridge of any ship during combat was the most dangerous place to be in a ship.
That's what everybody wants to shoot at.
Right. And so what he would do is that he would arrange to take the place of all the young men, because he said, I'm old, I've lived, they're young, they have their whole lives ahead of him. So everybody knew that Francis Carpenter was gay.
Yeah.
But Francis Carpenter was like one of the manliest men who ever lived.
I was going to say, I bet you 10 to 1, he never vindicated the right to use makeup.
He didn't wear makeup.
That's my point.
There's one known picture of him, and he looks like a lumberjack. And Francis Carpenter, after the war, was one of the few combat veterans who told stories of his exploits while laughing at them the whole time. And so he always became the center of attention, much to the rage of Orson Welles, who was one of the biggest narcissists who ever lived. And everybody, like I said, everybody in the military knew he was gay. The U.S. military made an inspirational recruiting film, the U.S. Navy, about Francis Carpenter, and they left out the gay part, but it's very accurate. And so this was like, this is a guy with like the biggest balls who ever lived.
Yeah.
And he was openly gay in the 1940s.
Yeah, but let's face it, it's. I don't give a shit, and I never did, and we've discussed this so many times. I don't give a shit who's gay, who's not. I really don't care.
No.
It's none of my beeswax. I'm as a freedom-loving old guy with a yarmulke now. To each his own. I really don't care what people do or not do. And more power to them if they're happy. My problem is with an army obsessed with promoting. Have you seen the pictures of airmen with the what the fuck do they call it? The rainbow flag.
Yeah.
The only flag in the Air Force is the American flag. You fucking imbeciles.
Well, yeah, but this is Biden's army. The point I wanted to make about Carpenter is he played by the rules.
Yes.
He played by the rules. And he didn't wear makeup. He didn't do anything because it wasn't allowed. He was a spit and polish sailor, and
like everybody else. For discipline, I
exactly.
think is paramount anyway.
Well, see, this is the thing, and you know, in an era of microaggressions, and when people say it's a stab in the heart to be misgendered, what happens if, okay, the director Ed Woods, who's considered the worst
the worst director ever in Hollywood history.
Right. He was a transvestite, and he was a combat, I think he was a Marine, and he wore women's underwear and a brassiere under his uniform when he charged the beaches, but he didn't wear them on the outside.
No.
He did it for himself in secrecy. And
I wonder, I always wonder if he was the inspiration for the character in MASH.
I mean,
because they should have known about Ed Woods.
They would have known about Ed Woods. I mean, I think the whole deal was he was trying to get out of the military, and so he was going to do this, and they said, "Screw you, we know you're faking, so you have to wear all this stuff anyway." But the whole thing is that, I mean, reality is that maybe, we don't even know how many gay people there are. It's between 2 and 4% of the population, and of them, the non-binaries and the men wearing makeup and all of that, it's an even smaller number. So the entire system has been changed in order to accommodate
0.5%.
It almost doesn't exist. And
no,
this is not anything.
Yeah, but I go a step further, my friend.
What?
I go one step further. What is this nonsense of displaying a flag so that X or Y or Z are also represented? The U.S. flag represents us all. Well, we don't need other flags in public buildings, in the White House, in embassies, or in the fucking military.
Well, they're actually not allowed, but
well, now there are. Now the State Department orders our embassies abroad to fly the rainbow flag on Pride Day.
Right, but
and they fly it on the top of the White House for the first Britain.
Right, but they're still not allowed legally. It's like Lloyd Austin doing what he did is...
Yeah, nothing is legal anymore.
Right, but it doesn't matter. I mean, Obama set the precedent when he would not sign executive orders. He would simply tell people to do things. And that's illegal for the president. The president has to make a record of what he's doing, and he has to do things within the statutory powers laid out for him. Obama flouted all that. Yes. Nobody gave a shit. So that's why we have the Secretary of Defense hiding the fact that he's got, I mean, they claim they caught his prostate cancer at the beginning. That's a lie. You don't get a radical prostatectomy if it's stage 1.
No.
So, it's, but nobody cares on the Democratic side.
Well, Obama is the guy who put on his desk in the Oval Office, the buck stopped somewhere else. Why the fuck are you looking at me?
I didn't
remember that. Well, Truman famously had a sign, the buck stops here.
Right.
Obama had a sign, the buck stops somewhere else. Why are you looking at me?
Yeah, I mean, Obama was a buffoon, and everything said about him by the press was not true. The most scandal-free administration on record. No, it's just that you didn't report the scandals. That's not the same.
Is a free press free administration?
The whole thing is just, I mean, this ideology can't survive unless it basically makes up its own rules, and that is not functional. It is not a functional ideology. You cannot, as we're seeing now, as massive wildfires, metaphorical wildfires, are breaking out all over the world. Guess what Ecuador is going to do with all the gang members who are threatening to overthrow the government?
Shoot the fuck out of them.
No, they're going to deport them to this country.
Oh, well, no. What they did is allowed for extradition. So anybody who's requested by the U.S., they're going to send. But they're not going to send people who are not citizens of this country. We're not going to take them anyway. Or maybe we will. I don't know.
They've announced they're going to deport them. They're going to end up here.
Do they ever? No, I doubt it very much. But I don't doubt Ecuadorians saying we're going to deport our citizens to China. Well, yeah, go ahead, do it.
Ecuador is all about like massive law and order, and they don't consider these people their citizens. They don't consider them anything except for garbage. And I'm just telling you,
we're going to have to agree to disagree on Ecuador. It's a fucking shithole.
Yeah, it's a shithole, but I'm just telling you what they said. They did say that.
Up until 2 months ago, the president of Ecuador, Correa, an ally of Maduro and Castro and the Mexican cartels, turned Ecuador into a, let's say, branch of Mexican cartels. And when the new president, Noboa, was inaugurated, the cartels launched a war on him, and they're shooting each other. The cartels have taken universities, have taken TV stations, have taken everybody hostage. Half of the army supports Noboa. The other half is on the take with the cartels. It's a shit show.
Right.
And they're not going to deport anybody because they have to catch them first.
Okay.
But they did pass a law that they would extradite to the U.S. those the U.S. requests.
All right.
Which is one of the beefs that these people have. But it's South American shit show at its worst. But we're going to take anybody who walks through the border anyway.
Yeah, that's my point. And so the issue is that this ideology is non-functional, and the Biden administration is so bereft and so hapless that their only strategy now is to just lie. I saw a video years ago, and it was a father filming his two little kids, and one little kid was shoveling snow with a big adult-sized snow shovel. And he took this big shovel of snow and he dumped it on his sister's head. And the father said, "Why did you do that?" And the kid said, "I didn't." And that's what the Biden administration is like. We're catching them on camera.
That's Mallorca's.
Dumping snow on. Well, it's more than Mallorca. It's everybody.
Yeah.
It's everybody. They're saying I didn't do it when they were just filmed doing it literally 1 second earlier.
Yep. They didn't create the situation with the Houthis, no. They didn't do it.
None of this is rational on any level because, I mean, negotiate what? The Houthis, nobody knows about the Houthis. The Houthis first appeared in 1994, and they're called the Houthis because the guy who founded the group was named al-Houthi. And
Muhammad Ali al-Houthi.
The dictator at the time launched several operations against them, including Operation Scorched Earth, which is exactly what it sounds like. When the Saudis were at war with the Houthis, virtually all of the damage you saw was caused by the Sudanese dictator, the Yemenis dictator over the previous 1994 to 2015.
Ali.
And the notion that these people would sit down and negotiate like civilized people, their flag says death to America, death to Israel. Islam is God is great and Islam will win. That's what their flag says. That's their national flag. Oh, we can negotiate with them. Sure, we can. Death to America.
I would negotiate with them. Do you want it in the head or do you want it in the balls?
Well, all we have to do is destroy their military capabilities, and it's going to take more than strikes by naval. I mean, we're going to need the equivalent of. We're going to need military launcher hunters. Air Force launcher hunters, and we could do it, but it would require a sustained effort. And
we're going to need special operators on the ground.
Well, I think they happen to be on the ground because a lot of the munitions being used are laser guided, and I know that that some of these aircraft have targeting pods, but it's much more accurate to have a special operator lasing.
And we're going to need not to let the fuckers know 18 hours ahead of time where and when we're going to bomb them.
Well, I mean, the thing about Democrats is they take half-assed actions which guarantee future. You hear the usual people saying that Biden circumvented Congress and that Congress should have declared war. And as you and I have pointed out, you don't want Congress to declare war because that gives Biden basically the powers of a dictator.
Yep.
So you think he's corrupt now? Wait till Congress gives him the power of a wartime president.
And I have news for the likes of these obnoxious democratic socialist Harry Dance in Congress. You don't need a declaration of war to bomb the living fuck out of a terrorist organization.
Oh.
Congress has already authorized it.
Of course.
Okay? The same thing happens if we were to bomb militias in Syria or pro-Iran militias in Iraq or the Houthis or Hezbollah. These are not countries, you imbeciles. We're not declaring war on France. We're bombing a terrorist redoubt in the fucking desert. We do not need a declaration of war. And the president already has the powers to do that, granted by Congress. What is it now? 20 years ago?
Yeah, 20 years ago. And the ramifications of a declaration of war, the last time we declared war was in World War II.
Yep.
And both my parents were both born in 28, so they were in their teens when the war broke out. And there was not a single aspect of life that was not impacted by the declaration of war. So if you really want to stick to, if you have a principle that you need to be adhered to, then be prepared to have your entire life turned upside down. Like you said, the president was authorized 20 years ago. A declaration of war has literally no end to it.
Mm-mm.
So we get to see the specter of any Democratic president being a wartime president in perpetuity.
Well, look at what happened the last time.
Yeah, exactly.
We had a president who, let me see, was able to legislate. Congress delegated legislative powers on that asshole Roosevelt. When you say no aspect of life was alien to his interventions, from buying or selling gold to, I don't know, getting credit, farming a land, owning a business, everything was affected. We still have organizations in this country, self-regulating entities that are a result of the blatant abuse of power by this fucker.
Yeah.
And we want to give that kind of power to Biden?
No, I mean,
really?
This is okay. We interned. Sorry, we didn't inter. German, Italian, and Japanese Americans. One of the rationales given was just the fact that there's been no sabotage is itself an ominous development.
Right. Okay? They're planning it.
And just imagine, you think the FBI and, whomever else, you think they're going after conservatives now in a declaration of war? Pack your bags and head off to the internment camp. And you think it wouldn't happen? It did happen.
Didn't Woodrow Wilson interned people who opposed the war?
Of course.
If you so much as spoke against the war in a newspaper, in a radio program, or in a theater, you would find yourself in jail for the duration.
What did Wilson and Roosevelt have in common politically?
They were assholes.
Besides that, what was the party affiliation?
Oh, wow. But they were both Democrats?
Yes.
And they were both fascists, because one was essentially at the very beginning of the progressive movement, and the other one was a progressive. And it was his nephew, I believe, who founded the second fascist party in America, which was called the Progressive Party.
Of course.
So when people in the US say, I'm a progressive, take a look at the history of the term. It's a certificate, it's a confession of being a fascist.
Yeah.
And was, like you said, both Wilson and Roosevelt.
Exactly. So, again...
And corrupt. And corrupt.
And morally superior and demonizing their opponents, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, everything that people are asking for are things that they don't actually want, but they don't know it because they don't know anything. And
well, I guess some Democrats do want this because they are authoritarian little shits.
No, I mean, all these people demanding that Congress declare war on the quote conservative unquote side.
Oh, yeah.
They're making common cause with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And
yes.
So, it's like what Biden
they might as well drop the mask and join Code Pink and stop bothering me.
Well, you think the attack on the Houthis was bad? It wasn't, because we gave them warning. We destroyed their infrastructure. Okay, the Houthi Air Force consisted of one aircraft, and we blew it up. Woohoo!
Yeah, wonderful. We didn't get any of their mobile launchers.
No.
We destroyed a couple of airports. Big fucking deal. They don't need them anyway. It's not like they're going to have to cancel Lufthansa flights now. We dusted up a lot of sand, scared a shitload of camels, and killed 5 Houthis. 5. Count them. 5.
Yeah.
it's a total waste of time and money, if you ask me.
Well, did you see the alleged training camp that was bombed?
Yeah.
It was a sea of craters that were left by the Saudis. I mean,
Yes.
and we hit some wood huts. I mean, okay, since we're talking about symbolism, why did you bring up the whole immigration, the so-called leaked deal?
Oh,
The Senate.
yeah. Let me tee it off a little bit better for those watching. Unless you've been under a rock for the last 48 hours, you've seen a lot of hoopla about the betrayal. The betrayal, I tell you, of Senator Langford, who went to bed with Schumer and betrayed us on the immigration issue. Right? This is the betrayal. Shall we go on this, Thomas, slowly, item by item?
Yes.
Let's do an X-ray of the betrayal. The agreement, and all of this is because Langford and Schumer reached a bipartisan agreement, which will probably be passed by the Senate. Whether this ever flies in the House is an entirely different question. It might. Number one, we are going to increase the number of green cards by 50,000 per year. What do you think, Thomas? Will this move the needle?
No, I'm looking up the number of green cards granted every year.
About a million.
A million.
About a million is what's legally authorized.
Yeah, so 50,000.
Yeah, and by the way, there are several hundred thousands that are authorized but are not granted every year because we don't have immigrants from certain countries with available quota, and the quota expire for the country that is issuing immigrants. So we have a shitload of green cards that we could issue but don't every year.
Yeah.
And 50,000 of those will be issued, admittedly, to people who have gone through the immigration process. Right?
Yeah.
Do you see a problem? Do you have a problem with that? I don't.
No, it's not going to make a difference.
No, I would say make it 100,000. I still don't give a shit.
No.
Issue number two, the ability to issue work permits for the adult children of those legally in this country with H-1B visas.
Yeah.
For people watching, you don't need this information. These are work visas. When companies hire, say, programmers in India or South America and bring them with an H-1 visa, which means they can work for this company, but no one else. And at the end of a period X, they have to tail back to their country of origin. Some of those people come in with children. Some of those children are, teenagers who might become 18, 19 years old while their parents are here and who are not allowed to work. Only the adult with the H-1 visa can work legally. So the children will either work illegally or not at all. Do you have any problem with those kids finding a job?
No, because for one thing, it's another negligible number.
For one thing, yes.
And
for the other, they're going to be in this country anyhow. Do you want them, collecting welfare? Or maybe if they're not entitled to welfare, do you want them scratching their balls, trying to tear down the gates of the White House?
No, working illegally, No, I mean, this is not an issue. This is better than it was before.
Bingo, I don't have a problem with that either. Now, the next point will, I'm sure, require an explanation for the hoi polloi. Immediate work permits to every illegal alien released from custody. And there is a trick. This is actually very poorly written. One of the reasons it's poorly written is because the illegal alien released from custody is illegal no more. Once an alien is being processed and given, say, a parole to wait until his case can be heard in an immigration court, let's say to determine if his petition for asylum is valid or not, they're no longer illegally in this country. They're now legal in this country. They have a permission to be in this country and a court date appointment. As things work under Democrats, maybe a 10-year wait, but nevertheless legal. What do they do until that court appointment arrives? Do they stay on welfare?
They work illegally.
Sleep on the streets?
They work illegally and
work illegally?
They get illegal IDs. They get illegal car insurance. They buy cars illegally.
Right. So is it, like off the wall to say, oh, now that they can stay and they have permission to wait here, let them earn a living and pay taxes?
Yeah, I mean, again,
I don't have a problem with that either. How about the next one? The next one is my favorite one. Taxpayer-funded lawyers for certain unaccompanied and mentally incompetent aliens.
Okay. How many of these people are deemed mentally incompetent?
Number one, I think the number is negligible to begin with. Number two is, what other solution is there for mentally incompetent aliens?
Just release them. That's what they're doing. That's what's being done.
That's
now.
what they're doing now. So put a lawyer and see what it works. I don't see a problem with that. I don't think there is a major expense involved. And I don't know what all the hullabaloo is about. Next one is interesting too. 5,000 migrants per day will be allowed into the U.S. How many are entering now?
Nobody knows. I mean, the estimate is anywhere from 18,000 to 25,000. I mean, nobody knows.
So let's call it 20,000 to round up. So this calls for a 75% reduction in the number of immigrants or migrants allowed per day into the U.S.
Yep.
A reduction of 75% right off the fucking bat. Without these limits, what is it going to be next month? 30? 40?
Yeah, I mean, again, this is 5,000 a day. I mean, everybody talks about, this is going to make the economy worse. Yes, but the economy is horrible right now anyway. And
yeah, I don't think this is going to make the economy worse, by the way. I don't think it's going to have an effect.
No, it's not going to have an effect. But the notion that illegals are making the economy worse, the economy is in the dumps anyway. And there's worse and then there's, it doesn't matter. I mean, there's bad and then it doesn't matter how much worse it gets. When you can't afford food and a mortgage, then...
Yeah, how much worse can it get, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, let me address a couple of things on the chat. That's a loophole, since 90% of those asylees will be denied. Well, it may jolly well fucking be, but until they're denied, they're legally in this country. Thank you very much. What do? Sell drugs in a corner or get a job?
Well, also
another one. Yeah.
In 2 years, 4 years, 5 years. What percentage of them even bother coming back? So what you can deny them this, that, and the other, but well, okay, let's finish this.
It's not going to work. And another one. Do aliens, asks somebody, who work pay income taxes? You bet your ass they do.
Of course, it's
legal
paychecks.
Every legal alien who works in a legal job, number one, they get their Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security taken off their check. They pay income tax like everybody else. People who are here on H-1 visas, on permanent resident visas, the green card or whatever, they pay taxes. people who are here on other alternatives like the LULAC, which was a consequence of the so-called amnesty of 86, they pay taxes. I'd rather they be working legally and paying taxes than working illegally and undermining.
What state government or federal government is going to turn down tax money that's owed to them? They're not going to waive taxes for these people.
Of course not.
They're going to collect.
Of course not. They'll be saying 302,000 entered in December alone. That would be 10,000 a day.
Yeah.
So we're talking about, in that case, a reduction of 50%.
Yeah.
In the number of aliens that would enter the country. Right now, I'll take it.
Well, okay, let's finish this out, and then I'll
Yes.
make the 2 points I wanted to make. There's one more to go.
There's one more to go. I'm sorry. Let me put it back there. And the one more to go is restricts parole for those who enter without authorization between ports of entry. Restricts parole, which is, it makes obtaining parole so much more difficult. You're going to have to come in through a point of entry in order to get that parole and these benefits that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Right? If you're not coming through a point of entry, you have a more restrictive regime. I don't know. This is not what I want. But it's way better than what we have, isn't it?
Well, look, I mean, we have to face reality. We don't have a wall. We're not going to have a wall until Trump is president. And God knows how many monkey wrenches will be thrown into the works that way. And we don't have an immigration service that does its job. So bitching about this is what this is this is a symbolic victory for the Democrats that they're taking, so they can wave it, and their idiots will say we won, and our idiots will say, oh, damn you, establishment Republicans, which also benefits the Democrats. So
of course,
it's not even a compromise. It's the Democrats didn't get anything they wanted. The Democrats
not even close.
No. So you got to use your thinking machine, your head machine, because you're being manipulated. And when you're manipulated, you say, I'm going to shit out the election. And then the next thing you know, Biden's been reelected or whatever. I mean,
and more.
And more.
If this were to be done, it's a far cry whether, I mean, it's anybody's guess whether this thing will pass the Senate and then the House.
Yeah.
But let's assume it does. It takes the immigration issue out of the election.
Yeah.
That is a masterstroke for Langford.
Yes.
Depriving the Democrats of the immigration hammer during the elections, because we have a deal, is beautiful.
No,
it's fucking beautiful. But those people that you were referring to, all those rhinos, all those people, they betrayed us. They're going after Republicans on an election year, and the only people they favor are Democrats.
These are the same people who want a formal declaration of war. They're it's as knee-jerk as I didn't oppose the Biden strike on the Houthis. I thought it was more symbolic than anything. And
yes,
it should have been like the strike on the Russians in Deir ez-Zor on whatever the hell it was. February 7th, 2018. Yeah, so
2007,
2018.
18, February of 18, yes.
So,
oh my God, it's already been like 6 years.
Yeah, and
holy shit.
it's and look at everything that's happened. Look at the situation we're in now. Look at how much worse everything is, with no end to the auguring in sight, no end to the plunge in sight. Okay, Trump had an Iowa town hall where he was talking about, what has enriched the Russians and enriched the mullahs is the high price of oil. And
Yes.
the price of oil would plummet if we were energy independent. And so one of the things that Trump has promised on the first day is to authorize drilling everywhere. And
Yep.
Trump is finally going public with something that I was saying a long time ago, is that the government can create capital. The government can generate income from its holdings. And this would allow us to lower taxes. And this was studied throughout the entire Trump first term. And everything needs to be set up in such a way that some idiot like Biden can't come in and undo it all with executive orders. We have to figure out a way to curb the power of executive orders, because okay, there's always the chance that he'll do an Obama and just give orders without, illegally. But again, it all comes down to the voters. The voters elected Obama, they reelected Obama, and we got what we deserved, and we got it hard, good and hard. So
Yes. But, we can dedicate an entire show to this, but I don't think it's a question of opening more avenues of revenue for the government, because whatever the government is going to participate in business is going to either close the raise the barrier of entry to private enterprise, or send them out to pack. We need to reduce government. We need to stop this madness. We need to close every self-regulatory agency. We need to stop doing everything the Constitution doesn't specifically mandate. We cannot have hundreds of thousands of regulation that stifle business, stifle entrepreneurship, and put a burden on the people in America who are actually working. We need to halve the number of government employees permanently.
this is a work in progress, and it's not a question of either or. You can do both. You can increase the ability. You can create the opportunity for the government to create create revenue without stamping on the toes of private industry.
Yeah.
And you can also reduce the size of the federal government. You can do both. You don't have to. It's not an either or proposition.
Yeah, but what I was referring to is the nature. I mean, if there was a time when there was no income tax, and the government still financed itself, and it did so through export duties, import duties, charging you for services. You want to get a passport right now? I think it's a couple of $100. Make it a couple of thousand. A foreigner wants to get a visa, let him pay. Let the services that the government renders as a legitimate part of government business be charged for what they are worth, and raise revenues and make them wholly autarkic. If we ever adopt that system again, the different branches of government would finance themselves through legitimate sources of income without having to burden those who, A, don't use those services. That's one of the reasons I'm perfectly in favor of tolls on roads. Because I don't think that poor people who don't have a fucking car and never leave their neighborhood should be paying for my road. but those who use it should. And in that sense, I agree with you. There are many ways that government can self-finance legitimately. I just don't want them where they shouldn't be. I don't want the government, let's say, competing with Dominion Power for the provision of energy. I don't think the Tennessee Valley Authority should exist.
No, and neither do I. I'm not saying that.
I know. I'm clarifying because maybe other people, without the clarification, think that we are propounding government going into business. That's not what you're saying, is it?
No, and the issue is, okay, the government can go into business in areas that require financing that is out of the reach of most private industry, and it has to do with creating an entirely different mindset. And the problem with increasing the price of services is that you then of necessity limit. If the cost of a passport goes up to $2,000, then you're going to see shitloads of Americans decide it's not worth it to go traveling because they don't want to pay $2,000 for a passport. And, everything has unforeseen circumstances. And so what you have to do is you have to choose the options that have the least amount of unforeseen circumstances attached to them. What can go south with this or that approach? I mean, we can't ever go back to the sort of government we had in the 1910s, for example. This isn't the 1910s anymore. So what we have to do is there's tons of government that can be cut. And then there's government departments that are here to stay, like it or not, because they're a part of the culture, basically. And it's going to take a gradual weaning off of all of this. And you begin with that which causes the least amount of that which allows your party and your ideology to be reelected to power over the long term. And okay, in Argentina, we don't know how long Milei is going to last. And
Your guess is as good as mine.
Right. And so we don't want a president to come in with a chainsaw. I mean, it would be fun, but it would also guarantee that the next time around, the next president is a guy promising to get everybody their goodies back, and that person will be elected. After my father died, I discovered that he voted for all the politicians he hated. My father was a very wealthy man, but he was adamant about his Social Security and his Medicare, and he used to have these long battles with Social Security and Medicare over 15 cents, 20 cents, that sort of thing. So he despised John Kerry and he voted for him because he fell for the lie that the Republicans were going to take away his Social Security. And
fucking Democrats have been saying that for 40 years now.
Right.
Come on.
It works. It makes the old.
It does.
Oh, I work for this. It's a sacred compact. And it doesn't matter that the system. I mean, if you're like, my father wasn't living on Social Security. He could have. I've been told by I used to get letters all the time saying I was eligible for Social Security. And I've turned it down. I don't need Social Security. And I don't feel
that's not fair. You have to get Social Security and give it to Quad Verum.
Well, see, I've looked at the pie charts and I've seen this enormous, more than half of the pie is dedicated to paying off our citizens.
Yep.
And I don't like that. I didn't want to be a part of that, just personally, because I've worked most of my life outside of the country, or I've been a freelancer, or I just don't feel that I should be a guy. I don't feel that I've worked enough in this country I haven't had enough taken out of my paychecks to go into Social Security. And also just the way my father behaved, it just turned me off of the whole thing.
Right.
And
you don't want to be, the bottom line is you don't want to be your father.
Well, this is completely idiosyncratic, and I'm not getting down on people who depend on Social Security or who really, there are people who need it. There's no doubt about it. But my father didn't need it, and he not only took it, he voted for people he hated simply because they promised to make sure that something that was never going to happen. Even the Trump plan, it wasn't about cutting off old people. It was about weaning young people away from thinking that Social Security, they didn't have to save a penny because they're going to get Social Security, that sort of thing. And,
I'm almost like you, but not quite.
Yeah.
Social Security, unemployment were sold as insurance.
Right.
You pay a premium and you get a benefit according to the premium you paid. So if you contributed a lot, you're going to get you're going to get $3,000-$4,000 a month.
Right.
If you didn't contribute that much, you're going to get $1,000. And if you contributed very little, you're going to get just enough to cover your Medicare payment. I know a few cases like that, by the way, of people who weren't in this country long enough to make large contributions. And when they got Social Security, they got $130 per month, which covers their Medicare payment, and that's about it. I have nothing against the concept of collecting that insurance. The same thing with unemployment. I personally never collected unemployment in my life. There are times where I could have, and I still didn't. It would have been legitimate, after all, every one of my paychecks, and I did work for airlines, for banks, for brokerage firms.
Yeah.
On every check, they took money to pay the insurance premium. So I guess I would have been entitled to it of all right, but I didn't do it because I was educated in a sort of contempt for those who do not earn their keep. And even though it is insurance, I still wouldn't go. Back in the day, it wasn't online. I wouldn't go stand online in the Social Security office to ask for unemployment. Fuck it. I'd rather work at a restaurant peeling potatoes, because I was never out of a job for more than a day unless I wanted to. And I think that that unemployment is for those who really can't get a job. Yeah. If you can, fucking get a job and stop bothering me.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I worked for, full-time jobs for about 2 years in the U.S. And the whole rest of the time I was a freelancer. I was working for my parents, I had a W-2 form like 2 years of my life. And
right.
It's
well, so your Social Security ain't gonna be that big a deal.
Yeah. I mean, they were hounding me. They hounded me for years, saying you're eligible. Why haven't you signed up? But finally, they gave up because I would just go and
the other thing with this, there's one thing, however, that I'd rather learn, and I'm worse than you. SSA.
Yeah.
I don't think that people who didn't contribute should get a fucking dime. Thank you very much. I cannot believe that this country is created entitlements for people who never paid in.
Yeah.
I think it's obscene to take money out of the pockets of working people so that you can give money to people who either worked and never paid in or never worked. Why? Send them to a shelter. I don't care.
Well, when I worked in Hollywood for 10 years, I found out that the richest people were the ones who chiseled the most. And that word entitlement is very apt because they felt entitled.
Yes.
And I knew this photographer. He was the premier rock photographer. His name is Neil Zlozauer, and Zlozauer commanded. The reason he commanded so many prices was that he always produced brilliant work, and you know, he and I used to go over, and he would just tell me stories, and you know, he basically was worth every penny. And he told me that when he would do a photo shoot, the publicist would call and say, "Okay, my client requires a catered meal and this, that, and the other." And he'd say, "Fine, he wants all that. He could pay for it. I'm not paying for it." And they were just like, and he would say, "Look, what you're saying is that you want this guy to show up and he's going to cram a huge turkey sandwich down his gut, and then he's going to get all sleepy, and then he has to pose for me. We're not going to do that. And I'm certainly not going to pay for it because most of it's going to go uneaten." And they were like, "But don't you know who this is?" And he's like, "Then find somebody else." And they would always come to him, and he would never pay for anything that they demanded. And the celebrities were famous for stealing the clothing. One of the most famous cases was an actor, and the photographer had his father's World War II bomber jacket, and he had a brainstorm, and he put the actor in the bomber jacket. And when they were done, the actor said, "Oh, this is great. It's mine now." And he stole the guy's jacket and sort of dared him to do anything about it. Well, I would have pounded his face until he took off my jacket. That's what I would have done. But
that works.
Entitled. These are leftists are entitled people, and the entitlement has gone to the point where I watch a lot of police body cam videos, and I had no idea that people in blue states were so entitled that they honestly thought that if they wanted to drive drunk, they would drive drunk, and there wasn't any, they don't cooperate with the cops, and they end up on their face in the concrete, and they can't believe it. And they start making threats, and the cops say, "I wish I had $1 for every time I heard that." These are generic people. Leftists are generic people. They all say the same things, and it's frightening. Young women, when they're arrested by cops now, they say, "I wasn't doing anything. Let me go." And they all do that. And it's like,
Leave me alone. Leave me alone. I didn't do nothing. I didn't do nothing.
It's, "I didn't do anything.
Yeah, no, those are the women. I was thinking of different neighborhood.
Well, it's really, really amazing how generic the psychiatrist David Viscott said, the sicker people get, the more generic they become. And if you go by the generic quality of leftists in our society,
well, their individualism is gone
completely.
They've destroyed their persona and adopted a new one. Remember those movies in the 60s of the little blonde, blue-eyed kids?
Oh, yeah.
A guy arrives in a town, God knows where, somewhere in the Great Plains, and everything is hunky-dory, like the Stepford Wives, and suddenly all those little kids that were playing around start approaching them, their eyes glowing.
Village of the Damned. That's the movie you're talking about.
Village of the Damned, yes. And now you're going to do what we tell you. But at that point, all the kids are speaking simultaneously with the same words.
Yeah.
That's democratic socialists.
Yeah, no, it's shocking.
I'll bet you one of those kids is Ocasio-Cortez, except that she doesn't have blue eyes and her teeth are too big.
I mean, it's really eerie because all you have to do to be a successful leftist is say the right things. And then you could openly live a life that goes against everything you've said. And it doesn't matter.
Yes.
There's a new TV series that came out, and all the episodes were dropped on the same day to get it out of the way. When they were done filming it, the director said, "This is unreleasable." They refilmed it as many times as they could. Then they decided to just get rid of it. I told you that the heroine is a deaf, one-legged Native American woman.
Yeah, we showed folks the poster for that thing on the last show.
Right.
And boy, did I ever think it was preposterous.
I forgot. Deaf, one-legged, body positive, meaning chubby Native American woman. And this thing, this was like this orgy of conformity, of moral preening. And
what were her pronouns? Yeah, I'm just kidding.
Well, see,
it.
The character had no personality whatsoever. She never smiled. She never. I mean, it's. And everyone was just left agog that you thought this would fly. It's like it's too much even for. There's a tiny handful of people who are going to die on the hill of this stuff. Californians, for one, will take any level. They're like Russians. They'll take any level of suffering for the cause. There's no depth to which Californians, will bottom.
What is it? That I always keep thinking. There are few people half as fortunate in the world that somebody whose luck brought him to California is one of the most beautiful, amazing places in the world. From coming down from the Mojave on I-10, and you go through the mountains, and first the deserts and the mountains, then the arid areas, then the coastline with a background. Los Angeles has this background of mountains, and every now and then the snowy peaks of the Sierra Nevada. It's amazingly beautiful. And then the immigrants in the late 1800s turned that fucking place into a garden. And the cities that popped up like mushrooms, but with an architecture that was the envy of the world. In 1981, I thought San Francisco was the most beautiful city in the planet, bar none.
Well, it used to be. It
was. And the environs, from South Salido the Contra Costa, the other side of the bay, with all of these hills and houses, and it's like somewhere 25 years ago. I would point the pivotal time at the second election of Brown.
Mhm.
No, the first election of Brown.
Right.
When they elected Brown as
Yep.
governor, it's like all of a sudden everybody went 1, 2, 3, let's fuck it up. And
Yeah.
they've been working hard at destroying that place, and now it's almost a third world country.
Well, it has to do with, okay, there was a video. I went to Disneyland in 1967, and I found myself on a video put out by the British Pathé newsreel service. It was a color video, and there I was buying my balloon, and it was my first helium balloon. And when we got home, I got out of the car and I wasn't holding the string tight enough. And this is a Mickey Mouse balloon, and it took off. So, I always remember that balloon. And there I am with my corn silk hair buying this balloon. And what I noticed about Disneyland is that almost everybody was white. Almost everybody was white, and everybody was thin.
Yep.
And
shitload of blondes.
Shitload of what?
Blondes.
Blondes. So what happened was the people who've torn down California, they're angry. Tons of them, if not the majority of them, tend to be non-white. Tons of them, if not the majority, tend to be fat. So they looked at California as like this white supremacy stronghold. And California used to be Republican. So,
oh, yes.
California was a Republican jewel. And
yes.
Leftists are motivated entirely by hatred of conservatism, just like Hitler. And
yep.
Since California was the crown jewel, it had to be destroyed. It had to be demolished. I saw, the Presidential Physical Fitness Award was, I don't know if it still is, it was given to high schoolers.
Yes. And up until 3 years ago, it was still being given. Of course, 4 years ago when my kids were going to high school, just about every kid got it. Whatever luster it once had, it had now become, another, equity symbol. Everybody got it.
Well, see, I think it was instituted at around 1947. And
yep.
I saw a video taken at a Southern California high school showing the Presidential Physical Fitness Award and what it required. And these boys came out, and the first thing they did was there was this ladder that you had to cross, and you had to cross it with your arms bent from rung by rung.
Yes.
So all these kids were doing that. And then there was this thing that I saw in gyms, and I never knew what it was for. It was a on a ship you have those belaying pins, those wooden belaying pins that you take out of these holes.
Yes.
This was like this wooden column, and it had these staggered holes with these two pins at the bottom. Well, you take this pin out and you put it in the hole, and then you you put the next pin in the next
Yep.
hole, climb using
And you climb up that way.
you climb up that way. And then there were these two parallel bars that you went up on top and you had to shimmy across. Holy shit, these kids in 1947 were like maybe 3 times physically stronger than the average high schooler today.
Yeah. Well, when I went to elementary and high school, we had to do all of that.
Yeah.
And and at the end of the year, we had to prove our physical ability. So we had to go through the entire course. And at the end of the course, because it was a final exam, they made us climb the columns to the second floor.
Yeah.
And it was like perfectly smooth columns.
Yep.
And I remember I made it to the second floor, about half didn't. It didn't matter because if you had gone through the course, you passed anyway. But when my kids went to high school in the U.S., the hardest level of exercise was walking to the loo.
Yeah. I mean, this is another thing. Okay, the leftists are by definition fascists.
Yes.
But they pointed at all these physically fit kids and they said this is military fascism and we have to destroy it. And the reason California is in the state it's in now is because it had to be destroyed. It was a success.
It was the land of Nixon and Reagan.
Exactly. And there are people today, well, okay, I don't know about today, but when I was last on Twitter, I left in 2018, there were old leftists still bitching about Nixon. And
Yes.
It was like, you've got to be kidding me. Okay, Stephen King still bitches about Nixon. He still bitches about the Vietnam War. And, it's incredible. It's beyond belief that these people are all frozen in this adolescent maelstrom of rage.
They never grew up. They never grew up. They carry the 60s and 70s on their face.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to forget about the fucking 70s since then. So it is baffling to me. Why would anybody want to hold on to it?
Well, when you look at what leftists replaced, conservatism with in California, where you've conditioned kids to think that a 7-hour wait at the DMV is short, and everybody's happy to get the shit app so they can navigate San Francisco without stepping in human shit.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of Oakland business owners are finally starting to arm themselves. I saw a video where these two idiots,
About time,
came running at top speed into a jewelry store wearing hoods. So the owner just opened fire before they even said a word, and he hit them both. And it was a very shiny floor. And have you ever seen videos of when cats try to run on like hardwood? They're just
Yes.
burning out. These guys are just burning out, and he's just like riddling them. And he was an immigrant, and he said, I gave the system every opportunity, and I finally realized I'm gonna have to buy a gun and train myself and defend my business. And think about
Sure.
that. It's and again, the only people really doing that in blue states are the volunteer Americans, the immigrants.
Yeah.
The natives are conditioned.
It was Muslim Americans in Michigan who started putting the school boards in order.
Exactly.
Because, and that should teach everybody a lecture. When they think that immigrants are going to vote Democrat, Don't be so fucking sure.
I mean, I've told this before. When Trump was running it for the first time, at the gym I used to go to swim, all the immigrants were loudly and vociferously, energetically pro-Trump, and all the white native Californians were these little pansies who were not going to vote for Trump because he was the devil.
Yep.
And the immigrants were just laughing at him. And there were Mexicans there. There were former Mexican citizens, or even people with dual citizenship.
No, take a look at Southwest Miami, and then you tell me.
Yeah.
So that's another one of the myths that are used usually by xenophobic assholes, and Republicans shouldn't be.
No.
By principle, we shouldn't be against immigration ever.
Well,
but these idiots who pretend to be Republicans, but then encourage people not to vote or to to go home because they're rhinos. They will tell you how immigrants are going to vote Democratic. What makes you so fucking sure? Why don't you find me a Cuban in Southwest Miami who will vote a Democrat?
Well, okay, you're talking about xenophobia. Let's get a little bit more intense and talk about racism. And the browning of America. No, what happened was the brownies started turning white because the brownies are marrying white people, and like it or not, white genes tend to be dominant. My mother was Mexican, and look at me. My father
in 4 generations, you can barely get a little bit of curly hair as a reminder. Yeah.
How many? Okay, you see American blacks who. Okay, Obama was half black and half white.
Half and half. He was a cafe au lait.
And his father was very dark skinned, and Obama was just on the edge of being, dark skinned. He was. You looked at him.
He was this far from George Harrison.
Well, exactly. Yeah, I mean, and the reason immigrants tend to marry outside their race is that they've become Americanized, and they don't see color as much. They're not as hidebound as, say, the people from the old country are. But real immigrants, like who want to become Americans, they tend not to be hidebound at all.
No.
Of course, a lot of Chinese immigrants, for example, they want their kids to marry Chinese people.
Yes. Well, because you know, as I know, that Chinese and Japanese are among the most racist fuckers in this planet.
Oh, definitely.
And they don't want any mixing. They don't want any miscegenation. They want their grandchildren and great-grandchildren to be Chinese just like me.
Their kids, I mean, I dated a Japanese American and a Chinese American, and neither of them were particularly fond of Asian Americans, just their preference. And they were both very aggressive tomboys, which goes against their. I watch a lot of Asian movies, mostly South Korean, and I'll be damned if the ideal South Korean feminine ideal isn't a little subservient, sweet. I prefer I saw a great Korean movie where the hero was an ass-kicking female, she was like a military intelligence officer, and she was super pretty and super butch. She only wore pants, and she slouched, and I was like, yeah, if I was gonna be on the market again, that would be the sort of woman.
That's it. Yeah.
Not the little hey, you know. But that's just me. And it's been my experience.
For the hi, I'd rather have a dog. It's cheaper.
Well, it's been my experience that there's a hell of a lot of Asian American, second generation women who are pretty butch, pretty tomboyish. They're not girly girls. Some are, but just as many aren't. And you don't get to be a tomboy in those countries.
No, you don't get to be a tomboy and survive.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
You can be a tomboy; they'll get you.
Yeah.
No, but that's in America, after 3 generations, all of that shit is done with.
It's done with, and there is no.
I tell people, and this was true in the 1850s, and it is true today. And of course, there are exceptions, but they're negligible. They're statistically insignificant. Immigrants would come in. Most of them will die still speaking their native tongue at home, and more often than not at work. That's why successive waves of immigrants took specific jobs. Cab drivers, grocery store cashiers, because you need a very, very, very limited English vocabulary to perform in those jobs. So in New York, the cab drivers at one time were all Russian or Polish, and the grocery store attendants were all Korean. And then the Russians were replaced by Middle Easterners, Afghans, Iraqis, and the Koreans were replaced by Indians, because eventually, they worked their ass off. They sent their kids to college. The kids still speak the mother tongue, but usually they meet a girl in college that is from an entirely different universe.
Yeah.
And they marry and move to Des Moines, and their grandchildren don't speak the mother tongue, they speak English. They're fully Americanized, and in 3 generations, the cycle is over.
Yeah.
And it's still true. The earlier Cubans in Miami were and in New Jersey were the Peter Pans, Los Pedro Pan. And their grandchildren will live all across the country, are married to generally American, particularly Midwestern women. Their children need translation to understand grandpa.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one of the closest Latino communities in America. But their grandchildren are already completely out of that reservation. That's the experience in this country. And if anything, they leave traces of their passing in words added to the vernacular. Who can live in New York more than a week without saying mashugane or schmuck or bodega? Who can live anywhere in the U.S. and not know at least taco and enchilada? Frankfurter. They all leave a trace, and that's it.
Yeah, and okay, I mean, I told you when I bought my car in whenever it was, the early thousands, went to a Toyota dealership. The salesman was a young, up and up Nigerian in a suit and tie. Um, the chief finance officer was a Saudi. The general manager was a Mexican, and then
Mm.
the overall commander in chief, who okayed everything and gave me a congratulatory pen, was a South Korean.
Yeah.
And these guys they all had accents, and they were probably more American than the average native born. They were definitely more American than the average native born,
Yeah.
Californian leftist. But they're all on the up and up. Nobody was on the dole, and they had nothing but contempt for people who weren't taking every advantage of the American dream.
Yeah.
And
Which goes to what you said earlier in this show. These fuckers who speak against immigration, and by the way, when I say speak against immigration, I don't speak against, I don't mean against illegality, because I do too. But did you notice that they carried over to immigration? We don't need any more immigrants. We don't need any more anchor babies. How many fucking Chinese babies were born in the U.S. as anchor babies? 10,000 in the past 30 years?
yeah,
20,000?
well,
Oh, because they were flying charters to Los Angeles. Yes, they were. Is true. Each charter flight was about 200 women, assuming all of these little Chinese babies live to be 18 in China, which I doubt very much. How many are we talking about? It's negligible. That's not a problem.
No, none of it's a problem, except for, I mean, the illegal Latin Americans, not the educated one. I mean, there are very few illegal educated Latin Americans, but okay, these people, they've been here 20 years.
I know two of them too.
Yeah. These people have been here 20 years, and they're just as primitive and creepy as they were
as the day they arrived.
Yeah, but they're a special case. They're like Norteños who are, I mean, the Norteño culture in Mexico is garbage, and it celebrates garbage. It celebrates narco terrorists and
and they do. Have you noticed how Netflix is now full of Norteño movies?
yeah.
It's
and that's
gag
another.
me with a spoon.
This is all embraced. I mean, leftists embrace decay and rot and destruction. And this is why leftists hate Asians, and they exclude Asians.
Right, because they succeed.
Asians are super achievers. And
yes,
they
work, they have a strong family unit, a strong family ethic, a strong work ethic.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you mean that actually still works?
No, what we want is criminal males and breeding incontinent,
breeding state-dependent women.
One of the touted lying statistics is that we have one of the highest infant mortality rates, if not the highest, if any, in
bullshit.
the country. Listen, hold on. The number one cause of infant mortality is teenage pregnancy. Yep. Our teenage pregnancy rates went through the roof with the influx of illegal Mexicans. And this was never discussed, but it's real. It's a real issue. And it's things like that. I mean, when I had my kidney stone, I didn't bother going to the emergency room because My brother reminded me when he had his systemic infection and they made him wait 7 hours until they had to do emergency surgery immediately. There were old illegals there who were in the emergency room because they were constipated.
Yeah.
There were Mexicans there for headaches, and since we understand Spanish, we could hear the staff telling the illegals, just make up an address because I have to have an address.
Yeah.
I mean, corruption, rot, decay, celebrated, you know. And now it's extended to criminals. You hear more and more now that these people, these organized crime rings are doing so because they're hungry and they want money to buy food. Yeah, they're buying $180,000 worth of food.
We're coming back to this point right away. By the way, we're going away from our conversation on the traces left by all the cultures that make up this unique experiment. And people are saying their hamburger, Bismarck's used to be my favorite dish. Is there anything more American than a German apple pie?
Exactly.
You know, it's like, it's beautiful. I so fucking like it. You have no idea. I relish in the world culinary expo that is American cuisine.
Of course.
And the architecture, from adobe houses in California to East Anglia style hatch houses in New England, and everything in between. It's gorgeous. You can travel the world without leaving the boundaries of the U.S.
When I was on the East Coast several years ago for the first time and driving around, Pennsylvania, I was seeing these weird symbols on the barns, and they were hex symbols.
Yes.
You know, never seen that before. Really fascinating. You know, just every state I went to was like it being in a different country, and I saw nothing that offended me about immigration.
No, on the contrary, I relish in that, and I despise with a passion those who try to make an issue of it.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean I'm okay with Biden, what Biden is doing on the border. No, fuck it. I'm talking about immigration. You know what the difference between immigration and these fuckers is?
The
difference between a passenger and a stowaway in a cruise ship.
Well, also a stowaway who immediately starts demanding free everything.
Oh, yeah, no, I need to eat in the first class dining room. Fuck you.
Yeah.
Now, I believe that illegals should have as many rights as a stowaway does on a ship.
Well, exactly.
Which is you get to go into the cargo bay until we can drop you off at the first port.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
Period. That's not immigration. We need to separate those two issues. And it may jolly well be, if this Langford deal comes through, that we're going to have the good fortune of not having this fucking issue in the election. And I hope we don't. I hope that Republicans in the House and in the Senate are intelligent enough to take the deal for the time being and remove immigration from the presidential campaign. Yeah. And I would also say that anybody who brings up abortion in the presidential race ought to be dragged into the basement and locked up until December.
Well, Trump's going to be the nominee. Nikki Haley is babbling about you know, um, forcing. I mean, it's when the Supreme Court said it's a states' right issue, they weren't kidding around, and that's going to mean
No,
some states are going to ban it, and you may or may not agree with that, but
no. And if you're in New if you're in Idaho, and in Idaho it's banned, go to fucking Washington State and don't bug me. It's a $20 bus ride.
well, how about why don't you keep your legs closed? I mean, there's a lot.
Oh, that's even better.
There's a lot you can do that isn't going to get you pregnant. I'm not going to spell it out for you.
Yeah, no, the aspirin rule. Do you know that aspirin is the best contraceptive there is?
But you
Just tell a girl to take an aspirin, put it between her knees,
and hold it,
and hold it.
Yeah.
And that way, they'll never get pregnant.
Yeah. No, I mean, and I don't know that it's gone so overboard that the public schools are teaching kids to have sex, and
They're teaching them better ways to enjoy anal sex. It's gone beyond
yeah, I mean, it's
abnormal.
It's not about education in order to avoid unwanted pregnancies and STDs. It's education on how to go out and hook up. And
Yeah.
there's a brewing backlash by men against the hookup culture, and women are thinking about how it's unfair. Be that as it may, it's reality. And if you start bragging about your body count, you're not going to have what is currently known as a high quality male be interested in you.
No.
That's just the way things are.
No, they're going to be the little whore for the rest of their lives.
Well, that's the thing.
If a woman decides to treat herself as an object at an early age, she'll be an object the rest of her life.
When I went to college 40 years ago, I went to college in Portland. And even...
How did you escape?
Well, it was... I mean, I had horrible grades in high school. And
No. What I mean is all my friends who went to college in Portland at the time I was at NYU turned out to be leftards of an impossible kind.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is that it was the only school. There were two schools that would accept me, and one was like this Jesuit nightmare, and the other was this college. I basically sent in an art project, and they wrote back and said, normally we would have problems with your grades, but this is such an amazing art project that it was a series of collages, and they said they'd never seen anything like it, and they figured I'd be a good addition to their menagerie, and so I got in, and I actually did quite well in college. But even in this center of libertinism in the early to mid 1980s, the girls had standards, and
Yes.
we knew who the girls were who would put out, and nobody respected them, and they were just called up when the man wanted some form of release.
They were booty calls.
And those women, those girls were a minority, and the other women, they weren't little skirt wearing Catholic or whatever.
They weren't saints, but they weren't.
Exactly.
Yeah, but they weren't loose with themselves. They actually had some respect for themselves.
No, I mean, most of them wouldn't go all the way, as it was known, and they were perfectly happy doing that. It wasn't that they were saving themselves for marriage. It was just that that you're not the sort of guy who I'm going to expend that sort of. I'm not going to allow that level of physical intimacy with you.
Yep.
We can do other stuff. And
But I never found one of those. Just kidding. Somebody says here, didn't Johnson say he would shoot down Langford's deal? Well, he said that, but all you need is 7 Republicans to vote with the Democrats for that deal.
They will.
Okay.
No, I mean, again, Republicans need to understand we don't have any super majorities or anything. So you're not going to get your ideal. I mean, God help us if you did get your ideals, but you're not going to get it under any circumstances. So just grit your teeth and put on your big boy pants and stop bitching. Just make sure.
The system was never designed for anybody to get their bucket list. It was designed for compromise.
Exactly.
It doesn't work if there isn't give and take. So all of you people who want things to work in Washington, stop listening to fuckers who want to exploit you and exploit your outrage, and realize that at some point there's going to be some level of compromise.
Well,
and if you don't know what that means, think in terms of Ronald Reagan and fucking Irish fatso, Tip O'Neill.
Tip O'Neill. Yeah, Tip O'Neill. They would fight all day and then go out and have lunch together or dinner or whatever.
Yeah, and of course he can refuse. Deb says it is correct. He can refuse to bring it to a vote. True. And what I would recommend in that case is that 20 Republicans who are not the Freedom Caucus make a motion to remove him, and let's see how it works.
Well,
because I would rather have a gridlock than bullshit.
We had 2 known assassination attempts on Republican senators that got really close, and in both cases, the police that killed the attackers were Democrats, and one of them was killed, and I can't remember the congressman's name. He was a big deal, and he spoke minutes after it happened, and he was crying, and he was talking about the officer who died, and he said he was a good Democrat, and we used to have political debates all the time, and the guy gave his life. The woman who shot to death the leftist nutter who killed Scalise, she's like a black lesbian. Take a wild guess what her politics are. And she was wounded herself, and she went after a guy with an assault rifle, not an assault rifle, with a semi-automatic rifle with only a handgun to protect her, and she killed him in defense of Steve Scalise.
Amazing how that works, huh?
Yeah. These are people who put their politics above they put their duty above their politics, and it's almost an antique thing now.
Yep. And Movie Time Bros is saying we like to call leftists utopians, but a lot of rightists have utopian mindsets as well, like those who who now insist on a federal abortion ban. Can you believe there are idiots like that? I swear to God, if I come across any Republican calling for a federal abortion ban from here until November, I will lock him in my basement.
Well,
and keep him there until after the elections.
Why do they want something that will be immediately struck down by the Supreme Court?
Because they're fucking imbeciles. Because for them, everything's to score points with their base. Not because it's ever going to become a reality, but because it's going to pay for the vacation home. Speaking of corruptions, we started talking about the unprecedented rot. Everything is fucking rotten in this country. Everything is corrupt. Ever since the Clintons came into the White House, everything turned to shit. And while there was always some level of corruption, there was always the cop who took a bribe. There was always the cop in the pocket of the local mafioso. There was always some level of corruption. But right now, everything is corrupt. The asshole destroying the social fabric of this country, calling for a federal ban on abortions, is as corrupt as the son of the president of the United States getting money from the Chinese Communist Party and splitting it with daddy.
Well, one of the biggest insider traders in Washington is Dan Crenshaw.
By the way, somebody's asked me if we left YouBoob. We hadn't, but since we're going into this thing, thank you, YouBoob. I appreciate your participation. If you don't click on the link to come to Odyssey, have a good life.